Welcome to Peak Humans, the podcast where we explore the tools, strategies, and mindsets that drive top performers to reach new heights. Today, I'm excited to introduce Dr. Celia Hambright, a leader in regenerative medicine and longevity science. Dr. Hambright is the owner of Hambright Consulting and serves as research director at Restoration Biologics and Boston Children's Hospital. He's also the co-founder and scientific director of Bay State Longevity in Aspen, Colorado. In this episode, we're going to dive into Celia's groundbreaking work in health span optimization and regenerative therapies. Dr. Celia Hambright, welcome to the show.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me. Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm excited to dig in with you and your expertise. But first, let's kick it off with what's your definition of a peak human?
Oh, great question. Yeah. I think the first thing that comes to mind is one who knows themselves quite well. It's certainly something I subscribe to. We do a variety of different testing in my research in here in Aspen. I think we're all different, obviously, physiologically, neurologically, etc. So I think it really begins with, understanding yourself.
Mm,
And I think that leads to peakness, if you will. I think it's the foundation for it. So one it's happy, it's clear, stress free. So yeah, I think the first thing that popped in my mind was I guess the foundational element of knowing oneself.
that's
Yeah,
awesome.
to
I love
achieve.
that because when I think of knowing oneself, I think of I think it was Socrates or somebody, right? In the Temple of Delphi, it says "Know Satan" in
Yeah.
like Greek, which is know thyself. But it's cool because the thing I love about what you do for work, and I've always been passionate about health and longevity as well. But it's like typically I would think of knowing myself as like my emotions and my spirit, right? And like just being true to my authentic nature. But
Yeah.
also knowing myself is also about knowing like my genetic code, right? Like my blood work. Like that's another really powerful way to know yourself.
Oh, absolutely. No, it's a composite score, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and they're all interconnected clearly. I'm a little biased towards more of these biometrics, if you will,
Yeah.
really. But no, these are all critical elements to knowing oneself. I mean, even just meditation alone is you're gaining clarity into that.
Yep.
So
Absolutely.
yeah, I certainly practice and preach those too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What got you into this? Why are you so passionate about longevity and health span?
That's a great question with a long answer. But in brief, I fell in love with science first, to be honest. I mean, I went to undergrad, obviously, and then I did some like internships or some stints in the laboratory setting and did some basic research, and that led me to go into getting a graduate degree and eventually getting a PhD. But I was really fortunate that at my graduate school we have a fairly recognized and very well funded longevity center. It's called the Barshop Institute for Aging and Longevity Studies. And I met, as typical with many different people in their professions, I met some key mentors in that space, and they were doing just what I thought was exciting work in the biology of aging, especially cellular aging. And what's happened since then, and that was all the science background, is that it's evolved into really a passion for democratizing some of these treatments, therapies, techniques, modalities, methods, whatever, to target some of these fundamental attributes of aging. So that the passion now is certainly in longevity science. It's certainly in understanding the mechanisms that drive these things at the cellular level and physiological level, of course, to evolve medicine the best I can in a very small way, but an important way. But it's really to make these therapies available or to make these therapeutics and these modalities available. And that's what I'm doing now. And so I'm probably more driven by, again, democratizing these things because there's some simple things we can do to achieve this peak human, state, as we were alluding to earlier, that work really, really well. And there is an educational element that can be lacking sometimes with people. And there is the cookbook to some degree as well. They're like, there's a lot of information out there. What do I do? What do I grab? What do I take? What do I change? And I like seeing those changes in a healthy way. I like being a part of that. I have a lot of information in my head, thankfully, in this space. And I really enjoy relaying that and being a part of that journey, if you will, for these individuals or clients. And that's really what's motivating me now. But yeah, again, I think it's interesting. I mean, there's evolutionary concepts that are interesting as to why we age. We're not supposed to live this long. There's how important is modern medicine in really driving these things, and what are some of the trade-offs in that, which we could talk about. But yeah, so I was initially interested in the science behind it. Now I'm interested in the application of it.
Cool.
Yeah.
How do we democratize it?
Yeah, lots of ways. I mean, the way that we do it here is we have honest, very curated programmatic approaches to guide individuals or clients through their wellness or longevity journey. So it's democratized because the questions I get the most, Naeem, honestly, are what is snake oil, what's not. People come in with a list on a post-it note, and they're like, I went to Thanksgiving and my sister's husband told me this or that. Is this true or not? I did some chat GPT or Google searching and found this and that. And so like I think we're democratizing it because we're curating this personalized experience where people come in at certain times and we track them and follow them and keep them updated. But with my background, I can aid them in kind of getting rid of some of the snake oil, getting rid of the things that might not help them so much, yet still keeping things that are evidence-based and might help them. Because we have to find things that are scientifically proven or validated as possible through clinical studies and preclinical studies. And we have to pair that with the individual's physiology or even genotype or genetics. And so that's difficult for people that aren't in the know. So we can use these very available therapies, but we curate them in a very personalized way, and then track these individuals so they can reach their goals in that space.
I love that. So, is it if we simplify things, and I know it's hard to simplify things, especially with the human biology, but is it
Yeah, yeah.
basically genotype and phenotype, and then you chunk down from there with everything, or no?
Yeah, no, that's a great way to put it. Those are two discrete buckets for sure. Those are two important things to look at.
Yeah,
And briefly, just to define those, so
yeah,
everyone's
exactly. I
on
was
the same
going to ask.
page. Yeah, yeah. So your genotype is your genetics, obviously. It's the A's and G's and C's and T's that are in your that make up your DNA. That's fairly immutable. There's mutations that occur, but that's a very static, stable representation of who you are. You obviously express those genes into different things, the way you look and the way you feel, and that's your phenotype. And so, and that's a very malleable arena. So, I mean, if you're a diabetic, for example, that's a phenotypic change that can be ameliorated oftentimes with diet if you're a type 2 diabetic. And so we want to categorize both of those buckets, the genotype and the phenotype. And so what's good about genotype, because it's so static, we can do genetic testing, look at your DNA sequences, and find signatures that would predispose you to metabolize in a certain way or to have a cardiovascular output in a certain way, to have performance metrics in a certain way, like respiratory effects or like heart rate variability or even VO2 max. I mean, predispositions for metrics in that space. So we take that and we can pair it with again this phenotype or these physiological metrics. And there's lots of ways to do that. One way we do that is through advanced blood work. I would say comprehensive blood work. Nothing really crazy, but very comprehensive. So a really big snapshot. And we can also measure brain activity. We do EEG scans, and so we can get an idea of your cognitive performance and your overall brain health, and kind of neurological output pretty quickly, using some technology. So that would be your phenotype. So again, we have kind of where you're at, where you stand, what your genes would predict or predispose you to,
Yeah,
and then that you can use that information to make a guided recommendation for any kind of lifestyle intervention to achieve like an optimal wellness and especially long term to promote healthy longevity, which is mobility, no pain, and cognitive function. That's all people care about. They care about thinking and moving and pain. If you want to know what older people come to the clinic for, that's basically it.
That's cool.
Yeah,
Longevity, mobility, no pain, and cognitive function.
that's right. Yeah. In that
Yep.
very simplistic way, that's it. And people want more energy, so that we can target that by looking at some blood work. But that kind of is related to mobility, right?
Yeah.
So if we have, and then you're, we always come back to this peak human thing, right? So I think in terms of like peak performance, those are the three important points. I mean, there's connections and love and your network itself. But clinically speaking, that's those are the three things that bring people into any clinic, really,
Yeah.
especially orthopedic clinics or geriatric clinics. Yeah.
And then is that called epigenetics when you influence your phenotype, but through your nutrition or move exercise? Or no?
Yeah, good question. Kind of, sort of. I mean, not really. A little bit, I think, is the proper answer.
No.
How do I diplomatically answer that? Because you can do that. Like you will see epigenetic changes through lifestyle modifications.
Yeah.
Yes, that's what's nice. So epigenetics is really it offers a targetable arena inside the cell that is between phenotype and genotype in some ways that is malleable. Okay.
Yeah.
And really briefly, what epigenetics is really modifications to the architectural structure of your DNA.
Yeah.
So inside every cell, we have long strands of DNA, right? That has to be piled up and tangled up and harmonized in actually a very, very well regulated manner by different things inside our cells. And there's proteins that hold all that together. They're called histones. And as you age, that architecture, that structural arrangement, for that packing, if you will, is significantly perturbed or disrupted. And so there's actually changes to the proteins, like the histones themselves, that keep that DNA coiled, that change,
Mm.
leading to a loose architecture or a loose structure of your DNA that leads to a variety of bad things that are associated with cellular aging.
Yeah.
But those changes, those modifications that affect the architecture, those are called epigenetic changes. So adjacent to genetics, so epigenetic. And interestingly, and this was discovered some time ago. You probably heard of the Horvath clock or something like that. These changes are predictable and they associate with chronological age. So they're a very trackable metric, which is really nice for testing because it'll change in a somewhat predictable way over time. You'll see more methylation or different methylation patterns as you get older. You'll see more decondensation. You'll see more what we call heterochromatin foci that's associated with senescence. It's basically little blocks of aggregate proteins that are in the DNA that crop up with aging. But it's very predictable and targetable. So to your point, yes, you can change or uh,
Influence.
influence and improve the epigenetic profile. But genetics is not quite so much. But we can test that too, and it's very important to test, and it's very popular right now. This genetic clock, or this like biological age versus chronological age.
Yeah.
And so I get asked that a lot, quite frankly. And it's a great test. It's good. And but it's only one piece of the puzzle, right?
Right.
Yeah.
That's cool. So that's the genotype, and then there's the phenotype.
Yeah. Yep. And so that the epigenetic landscape will also affect phenotype. And the things that we care about are the bad changes that occur that lead to DNA disrepair, that lead to more oxidative stress, that leads to DNA damage due to the oxidative stress, that leads to telomere shortening, which I'm sure you've heard about. We call it telomere attrition. And you can rescue that. You can salvage that.
Is that the
Um,
main cause of aging? Telomeres getting shortened?
That is yeah, this gets asked a lot. The short answer is yes, but it's a piece of the puzzle.
Yeah.
So there's several different what we call hallmarks of aging or cellular senescence. That's definitely one of them. It's not rescuing that's not going to rescue all problems. I think that the most important fundamental root cause or etiology of organismal aging is inflammation, which can occur for various different reasons. And that can also lead to more telomere shortening.
Yeah.
But here's what we know. We know telomeres shorten with age. We know the mechanism as to why they shorten with age, and it makes sense. It's an enzyme related mechanism. And we can extend these telomeres and we will rescue many different age related phenotypes, especially in cells. The problem is when you test humans, You got to grab the right cells. All cells are different in your body. Your cheek cells might be different than your liver cells, for example.
Ah,
Oftentimes, these kits will check cheek cells or buccal swabs, you know.
how are the
Um,
cells different? Just they have different DNA?
they're
Is that
exposed to different things. Yeah, the DNA is the same, but they're exposed to different things, right? So there's more stressors involved. I mean, there's literally more environmental stimuli in your mouth, right? As you're eating there, you know, your mouth's open to the environment, etc. So like those cells are not the best cells that would really recapitulate your physiological aging
so
markers.
they're only different because of what they're exposed to, but they're all the same makeup then, yeah.
Yeah, the DNA would be the same. But if you're looking at telomere attrition, for example, they'll undergo more stress there. So you
Yeah.
might have a different telomere length or different telomere attrition in those
Uh,
cells versus others. So we use what are called peripheral blood mononuclear cells. These are immune cells in your blood, and I would say the trusted labs and good vendors and the good research will oftentimes use the immune cells of your blood as better proxies for all these kinds of tests, quite frankly, but especially telomere shortening or inflammatory status, because the immune system is really what's perpetuating these inflammatory signals that are associated with aging and, more importantly, the age-related pathologies that occur as you get
yeah.
older. Yeah.
Got it. Interesting. That's really cool.
Yeah.
Um, can you define phenotype for people that don't know what that is?
Oh, it's the manifestation of the genotype. So phenotype can be affected by
Ah,
environment, right? So your genes will transcribe different proteins, or RNAs, and then turn into proteins to do this, that, or the other. So you have predispositions. The phenotype is the outward expression of that, but it's malleable. So you could be a healthy 28-year-old person. And then, but if you expose yourself to toxins or eat too much sugar all the time, or you're not in the gym, or your lifestyle's not great, then your phenotype becomes an improper phenotype. So, but it's reversible. So its phenotype is the expression of the genotype, literally, because your genes are expressed, right? That's what
yeah.
we call it. When you make RNAs that then turn to proteins that make this and this, that's an expression. So your phenotype is an expression of that. So when we're targeting these things, when we target anything therapeutically, we're targeting a phenotypic element, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So can in turn phenotype also influences genotype? Yeah, because if I don't take care of my body and I have kids, does that express into their cell?
Oh, yeah. Especially in moms. Yep. There's some good literature out there. I'm not an expert on this literature, but I'm certainly aware of this literature, where there seems to be um, a transmission of if you want to call it phenotype or lifestyle characteristics to child. But the way it's doing that actually is through an epigenetic profile, not a genetic profile.
Mm,
So there's been studies that have compared these epigenetic signatures of mom and child. So if mom is type 2 diabetic or not doing very, very well with their diet, etc., it can predispose child
yeah.
to some of these conditions. But that's an epigenetic signature. It's not the genes. The genes are dead set. The gene that genetic profile happens very early on in the blastocyst, or very early on in embryogenesis and before actually at fertilization, where you have these rearrangements from mom and dad. And so those genes are static once they're formed. But that epigenetic profile seems to be a transmissible
So that's what's
phenotype that can be affected.
so
Yeah.
that's what's influenceable. Okay, got it.
Yeah. And then but I will say, I think don't quote me here. I think it's less affecting from dad. It's more mom, in
The
that case.
epigenetic,
Yeah.
the epigenetic.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
Yeah,
just the transmissibility of this lifestyle to
that's
child.
interesting. Yeah, so
Yeah.
the genes are like the 23 chromosomes, mom, 23 from dad. That's the genome, but then the epigenome is more influenced by the mom. Interesting.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah. And well, it's also a give and take between baby and mom, right? That's
Yeah.
what's great. So, I mean, we could go off on a tangent here, but you're getting fetal DNA and fetal signatures in mom's bloodstream, right?
Yeah.
And interestingly, uh, mom is the healthiest she's been in a long time when she's pregnant because you're getting this like boost in immune function which is really important for tissue repair and homeostasis of stem cells, et
Yeah.
cetera. I mean, all the good things that immune cells do. It's not just bad. And they're getting some feedback there. So there's actually been some studies that actually one of our collaborators in Houston did this, where they would notice that if mom got a C-section, that the scar would heal so much quicker than a typical scar would heal because they had this like enhanced immune response. Immune cells are very important to heal scars and do tissue remodeling. Like all that, whenever you get a scar, these immune cells actually eat some tissue and rearrange it and build. They're building. They help with the building blocks of that repair, and they would have very little scarring. And so they actually did a whole study about this and found out that it was this bolstered immune system, this immune function of macrophages that was due to the mom being pregnant. So like that's so moms are like they're hyper well, I would say.
Yeah.
They're pregnant. That's why the hair grows more, etc. Usually, and like the glowing face. It's a thing, you know. It
That's
makes
cool.
sense evolutionarily too, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So they get like
Yeah.
superpowers. That's
Yeah,
cool.
they're like superpowers. Yeah. Same thing with kids. Like it's hard to beat a 1-year-old's immune system, or a
Yeah.
2-year-old's immune system. They're like talk about peak. They're peak
Yeah.
performing there. It's
Yeah.
all downhill, after you're like, after the testosterone comes in post puberty or whatever. But it's so what I kind of smile about it because I mean as a parent too, I think about this, but there's always this I feel like we're a little overprotective with
Yeah.
germs and let's be safe with the kids. So don't touch this, don't touch that, wash your hands. It's like, man, they're they're gonna be immune to everything. I mean, they're hypersensitive in a good way to all these insults. And in fact, you need that as well, clearly.
Yeah.
But but you can't beat a kid's immune system. It's top notch. Yeah.
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 Absolutely.
Yeah.
So what, how can somebody, if they want to become more of a peak human, what do they need to do? Like, what's the fundamental baselines they need to start measuring and tracking and making sure they have dialed in? What would
Yeah.
that? And this is all stuff you do at Base State Longevity at your clinic in Aspen, right?
Mhm. Yep. Yep. Yeah, I mean, it's age dependent for one. So if you came in, Naeem, we've talked a lot about this. I mean,
Yeah.
you'd be a different profile than others. There's
Yeah.
the 65 plus, I would say moderately or okay diet person, that's mildly active. That's pretty easy to take care of. But like when you're younger and in better form, it's a slightly different protocol. It's more performance based usually.
Yeah.
But to
Let's
answer your question, I mean,
let's say that's kind of the bucket we're talking about, right? So the 20s, 30s, 40s that are performance based people that are running their own business,
mhm.
entrepreneurs that they work out, they take care of themselves, but they still want to dial things in and go to the next level.
Yeah, I would say it's sleep, supplementation, and hormone testing for sure. We lose our energy. It varies per person, but you get in your 30s, especially 40s, you're probably going to have some loss of testosterone levels, for example. I get this question the most probably from this age bracket, that 30s to 40s to 50s, is what do my hormones look like? How do we test for that? Should I get hormone replacement, which is a different conversation, which we can have. Um, but and sleep is oftentimes perturbed because of kind of westernized diets and activities. And we're kind of staying up later, where if you're working a little bit harder or later, work culture is kind of big here. Coffee later, etc. And these supplements can help with sleep. We always recommend that. It's usually a sleep thing and an activity level, which are kind of connected. So for
Yeah.
that demographic, we do all the blood testing, which we can talk about. The biomarker assessment comprehensively is important. I'd say the big buckets that they care about the most, or we care about the most, will probably be glucose regulation, where that stands.
Yeah.
A little bit of triglycerides. Lipid profile is important, but I think much less important than your glucose homeostasis. So we're going to look at A1C, estimated, obviously fasting insulin, obviously fasting glucose. Hormones are critical, and not just testosterone. I mean, we need to look at the gamut of hormones. Even feminizing hormones are important to be in balance for a male or female. So we can do FSH and
Estrogen.
luteinizing hormone and testosterone. And more importantly, the protein carriers that deliver those hormones where they need to go and the precursors from your adrenal cortex that make those steroid hormones. So that's the biggest thing. And then it's a lot of it's activity. So we got to get them to be doing, more type 2 activities and or type 2 cardiovascular activities. We need to get that heart rate up a little bit more. And strength training is important. But strength training is actually more important, I would argue, for the 65 plus crowd as well.
Yep.
But those two things,
For the bones.
well, three things or four things. The supplementation built around neurological performance, so nootropics we'll use for cognitive performance. The activity level elements. Getting someone on a routine kind of changes everything. Most of the time, people just don't know what to do. You just tell them to do it, and like, okay, I'll do that.
Yeah.
So it's activity level and the baseline testing. Sleep is a big mover we're finding with all of our readouts. I know it's very much in the zeitgeist right now. Everyone's talking about sleep. I know it's important, so I'm not like I'm not uh, making surprising claims here, but sleep seems to really move the needle. So we do that a lot. For that demographic, it's that, and hormones is probably the biggest target. And what I'm also mentioning is things we see the most disruptions in. So the reason I answer your question is here's what we look at with that demographic is because what I've seen with that demographic are perturbations in those arenas the most by far. Yeah, so it's like hormones, activity level, and sleep. And then older is a little bit different. Older is a little bit different, which we can talk about, but it's slightly different.
So when people come to Bay State, there's a lot of things, right? So how do you
Yeah,
actually start building out a roadmap or a curriculum and track this all and take them through a program? How does that work?
yeah. What at intake we have some collection forms to talk about their goals, obviously their lifestyle, a little bit of medical history that's important. If they have a certain condition, especially kind of hormonal conditions, we need to know about that to help kind of guide them through it. And of note, this is all under medical direction, by the way, too. Like I'm a scientist, right? And so I can speak to all these things. So we have a fantastic medical director that oversees any of these interventions or recommendations. But we are not in the business of medical management. So if someone, for example, came in with diabetes and they want to try, Ozempic or something, these are not things that's in our ethos for one or within our wheelhouse.
Yeah.
But to answer your question, when they come in, we do a litany of baseline testing that includes various different things, but it's a little bit patient specific, but we'll generally capture, again, a comprehensive analysis of their serum or plasma profile, so blood biomarkers. We'll do brain scans. We'll capture EEG signal from their brain to measure really overall cognitive performance, but also some anxiety metrics and focus metrics, things like that. General brain activity.
Yeah.
Um, and we'll also do microbiome testing. I think this is very much in the zeitgeist now, but we are seeing significant benefits by alteration of diet, via alteration of the microbiome with improved sleep and improved energy levels, decreased inflammation. This is a huge um, culprit in regards to this systemic inflammatory state that a lot of people can be in with poor diets. So we do a microbiome test. And we do the genetic testing that I mentioned to you earlier. We look at a ton of different alleles and mutations. And we also do epigenetic tests, which we talked about earlier, where we can kind of gauge their biological age versus chronological age based on those histone changes or the epigenetic signatures in their DNA. And we can tie all that together and get that kind of baseline understanding. And then we make recommendations for diet, lifestyle, which would include movement or activity. And we offer a variety of different holistic wellness therapies at our clinic that can target some of these things. That's age specific. So we're big believers in contrast therapy. That is contrasting infrared sauna with a cold plunge. We do this in a private room, so you can go back and forth whenever you want. Chronic contrast therapy, the evidence is there. This is on our webpage. There's been a variety of studies that have demonstrated the efficacy in reducing inflammation and boosting neurotransmitters that we want to see using contrast therapy. So it's a great longevity intervention that's very holistic and ancestral. We also have a hyperbaric chamber, which is fantastic.
Why infrared sauna?
There's a photo biomodulation effect that can occur too. I would never speak negatively about the traditional taught.
Right.
It's great. What you want to do is sweat, right? I think if I were to choose, it's a little bit better to do infrared because you're using the light itself. So you're getting a deeper, more penetrative
Yeah.
heating. And this is pretty evidence-based as well, to be honest. And the effects of photobiomodulation from that light source is also very evidence-based. We're going to see positive effects on mitochondria in your cell, for example, on collagen formation in skin. That's not what the goal is in our saunas, but that additional infrared light effect itself, I think, makes it better. But I
Yeah.
would never not recommend any kind
Yeah.
of sauna. And
Yeah.
I think others do that. I don't really like that very much because I think if you're doing it, it's great. Start by just doing the thing. Then there's probably a more optimized way to do the
Yeah.
thing. But still do the thing. I think the contrast therapy alone, whether it's in a big ice bath like we have, or just go standing in the cold, that's both good. It's equally good. If you're surrounded by liquid, obviously, you're going to have increased or enhanced effects, clearly. Just thermodynamically, you're surrounded by the cold fluid versus air. But that contrast, that hot to cold alone, however you do it, is good,
Yeah.
period. The chronicity of doing that no one really knows the answer to this. Like how long you stay in there, how frequent you do it, or how much
Yeah.
you go back and forth. So one of the things you really care about, I don't want to get too far off topic, but one of the things we really care about at Bay State is, and we'll publish on this obviously, is to better understand that protocol for different demographics. Like what is really working. So we have like an elite athlete, high performance person. What is their protocol that works the best? Because we have the metrics to track things, which one, what actually works best for them when it comes to the contrast therapy? How long are they in the hyperbaric chamber, and how often a week, etc. No one really knows the answers to that per se. So
Yeah.
we're really conservative with it. We just say do it frequently, multiple times
Yeah.
a week. But yeah, so we had the patient come in, we build that out for them, and they come in and do those at the frequency and chronicity that fits their schedule, but also is efficacious, right? And so we really try to make sure that they understand, like, you can come in here once, that's fantastic. We'd love to have you. But if you're going to do this programmatically and you want to elicit this change, this delta that we can track, we're going to have to do this at some frequency.
Yep.
And you will see improvements 100%. I guarantee. Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely. That's really cool.
Yeah. And we have lymphatic drainage or lymphatic massage, compression suits, and Normatec. And I really do. I'm a big believer especially the lymphatic massage. I think it's really good, especially if you're doing a lot of like more intense activities or intense exercise. If that's part of your routine, I think that works really, really well. And so I try to employ that when we can. And then patient specific, I also recommend, and we'll do some of these things on site as well. Different mindfulness therapies. We also have massage. We have an acupuncturist. And I'm not the expert in those, but I do think those augment what we're doing pretty well.
Yeah.
Especially the mindfulness therapies, whether it be a sound therapy or a breathing therapy or any kind of meditative um, therapy that people are doing on site. And we always, the way we track that, by the way, is we have clinically validated questionnaires that we can ask people that are best described as quality of life questionnaires. And Naeem, you would be shocked to see the scores that will go up with just these simple practices.
Wow. Yeah.
Because the questions are so simple. You have like a 10 question questionnaire where it's like, how happy are you? What's your sleep like? How often do you like meditate? How many miles a week do you walk? And all these things will go up. And with simple intervention. So going back to the original point of this democratizing these things, we are seeing tremendous benefit with clinically validated tools by offering ancestral or holistic therapies to
Mhm.
people that they might not have done if they wouldn't have checked out our site or someone else's. So
Yeah.
that's what gets me going. I love seeing that. We don't need metformin per se all the time. We don't need insulin all the time. We don't need, big pharma to help us in many ways, as a generally healthy 65-year-old to achieve these goals and feel better and perform better.
Yep.
And that's what, so we're excited about that. That's what gets me excited, I should say. Yeah.
I love that. I
Yeah.
agree for sure. Right. It is setting up it's the habits and the rituals. I always tell my clients, right, are to in every area of your life, but especially your health, right, and your wellness and your longevity.
Yeah.
It's not just doing it one time. What about so if somebody wants to improve their sleep, for example, what would you suggest them to improve their sleep?
There's activity changes for sure. So it's like the easy stuff. When are you drinking caffeine? You'd be surprised to see that I'm actually having a cup of coffee right now talking to you, but I will say decaf is great at afternoon or after two, or green tea. But you'd be surprised how many people are doing something as simple as that, where they're not sleeping well and they're taking stimulants to some degree later at night.
When when
And
ideally
then
do you want to
go
cut off
ahead.
the coffee? When is your last caffeinated cup of coffee ideally for somebody who drinks coffee?
I say noon. I don't think anyone knows the real answer, but definitely not late afternoon. But I always just for to be conservative, I always say noon. You want to wait a little bit till your cortisol drops in the morning to probably have your first cup. So I think there's a window. I always try to practice that window, and I generally myself honestly do this too.
Yeah,
And there's always the times where we have a deadline due or something like that, etc. But that window, that hour after you wake up, and try not to have one afternoon. And if you can decrease that, that's good too.
yeah,
Because you'd be surprised how little caffeine you actually need if you're not so reliant on caffeine.
yeah,
And I'm not trying to oversimplify this because the simple answer is like no, less caffeine, you'll sleep better. But a lot of people that come in, that's what they're doing. They're drinking caffeine at like 7 p.m. So I have to like reiterate this, like, guys, pay attention to your caffeine intake.
yeah,
And obviously the death scrolls or
yeah.
the light sources from your phone are quite terrible at keeping you awake and not allowing you to achieve REM sleep and get to sleep quickly. And the biggest thing too, so those are two like things you can change lifestyle wise. Oh, and supplements are good. L-threonate, cherry tart extract are my favorite sleep aids that are not pharmaceuticals. They
L
work great.
L3 I never heard of that before. Okay,
L-threonate.
how do you spell that?
Uh, it's going to get you more into that theta brainwave, a little better REM sleep.
That's magnesium.
Yeah, yeah,
Ah, cool. So it's
yeah. There's just different types. So it's like that's the one. And in fact, we built out. I say we loosely. I have scientific collaborators that did most of this work, but we sell a brand that has L-threonate and cherry tart extract that was put together with our collaborating neurologist, Dr. Saeed Assad, a friend of mine. He's at Universal in Jacksonville, Florida.
nice. I was just gonna ask
Universal
you,
Neurological Care.
is there one you
Um, mhm.
so what is that one that you recommend? What's it called?
It's called Deep Sleep by Baseline Neuro. Um,
A baseline neuro.
but it doesn't have to be that brand. That brand's great. I speak highly of it. Like with any supplement, you need to really care about where it came from, the manufacturing process, etc. So we pay close attention there. But really, the compound itself, that's really the big driver, and it's cheap too. By the way, that's the thing. It's like this thing could be $25.
That
Yeah, there you go. Um, that's your 24 pack, obviously. And this works great.
this is
Um,
$600.
that's the 24 pack. I think it's like
Oh, 24,
four
24
different
cartridges.
bottles. You need one bottle
Oh,
there.
got it. Yeah, so that's like
Um,
for these
you can
bottles.
also, while we're on this topic, if you're curious, I get this question a lot too. What are some trusted vendors for like these general supplements, whether it's vitamin D or taurine or L-threonate? See, this has tart cherry extract.
Yeah.
Designs for Health is a fantastic supplier and a very trusted vendor with all the evidence-based practices or all the evidence-based background for all their supplements on their website. We order a lot of things from Designs for Health as well. They're great. We've had great feedback. I prefer them, and they're well sourced. It's a great vendor. They keep track of their COAs. Their manufacturing process is on point, and they do a great job. But deep sleep is great. So I'll recommend this a lot. I take this. I recommend it to anybody, along with the caffeine and decrease afternoon, and
So
then the
is
light
this just
source.
just as like a sup that magnesium, it's called Calm, that powder stuff that we put in sometimes in the in
Yeah,
but this is the
I
same thing for a replacement of it.
I think that's just magnesium.
Yeah.
That's great. I mean, I haven't used it a long time. All these are good.
Yeah.
I would that helps people. I mean, even melatonin's not bad, to be honest. You want to try to do this more naturally, because I'll tell you the biggest thing that I see that works besides these like behavioral modifications, if you will, and then this supplement would be getting yourself on a schedule and going to bed at the same time. They're like the psychology behind sleep. That seems to work really, really well.
Yeah.
If you get used to doing a thing,
Yeah, the consistent
That
sleep wake time.
consistency. Yeah. And you don't need this supplementation sometimes either because you're on this consistent schedule. And I would also say that the light source is a problem, certainly. So maybe don't look at your phone. But if you're listening to something that's not verbal, like not a podcast, and I'm guilty of this too. Don't get me wrong. I'll do this every now and then. But you can listen to any kind of application or even on Spotify, like the theta waves
Yeah.
sounds, because you want to get to that theta brainwave state, obviously. Those help tremendously. So that schedule, any kind of inducers of theta waves, and then they're like, there you go, there's your glasses. Yeah, great. And these are so simple, Naeem. It's like we don't. It's the problems are epidemic in some ways, and the solutions are kind of simple.
Yeah, that's the wild part. That's again, that's why I
Yeah,
think it's so powerful, right? Like people, it's the simple things that we still don't do them because sometimes we outsmart ourselves or
yeah,
I always tell my clients high levels of success come from doing the simple things everybody knows, but nobody actually does.
yes,
So we all
you're
know to
spot
do this
on.
stuff, but then we're like, oh, meditate or go to sleep on time or drink enough
Yeah,
water every day, like whatever, like not that big of a deal. Or I know that, but Tony would always say, I don't care if you know it, I care if you do it. So it's a
right. You're spot on. I'm curious what you think about this too, Naeem, and that is what I've noticed is like the non-doers or the non-compliant clients. I used to I used to in some ways associate that with apathy, maybe some laziness or whatever. They just don't want to do it. I'm not seeing that so much. What I'm seeing is people are just inundated with information. They don't know exactly how to translate that into a schedule or a practice or organized attempt.
yep.
So if I'm like, so I could say, like I just said, try to go to bed at the same time every night. That might fall on deaf ears. If I'm like, go to bed at 8:45
Yeah.
for whatever reason, because I've associated a time with that interventional strategy, that lifestyle change, then they'll do it. They're like, I went to bed at 8:45 every night. And I'm actually feeling better. I did the H spot or I did hyperbaric those 2 days a week on every Tuesday and every Thursday, and it was great. And it's like it's irrelevant that it's Tuesday and Thursday, but the structure of it, I've
Yep.
noticed it significantly enhances compliance. I mean, do you see this too with
It's so true.
your
Yeah. When you give people a target and something to focus
yeah,
on, kind of like
yeah.
you give a dog a bone to chew on, then for some reason, the psychology, because it's really from what I've studied and found effective is people, we all have six human needs, and one of them is certainty.
Mhm.
So we have certainty. It's like, oh, this is what I need to do versus like get to sleep on time or drink enough water versus drink eight of these a day. It's like, oh, I know
Yes.
exactly what to do, and that's what I'm going to do.
Yeah. It's just the psychology behind it, right?
Yep.
And it works for me too. But I was impressed to know that if we're just more specific about things, and again, really weed out the snake oil stuff or weed out the information that's not necessary, that's kind
Yep.
of clouding it, you know, uh,
Totally.
it seems to work pretty well.
And
And
that's why I'm excited about what we're doing together, right? The power of the two combined with your work, the peak humans on the
Mhm.
genetic
Yeah,
genotype phenotype side, and then the peak humans on my side where it's the psychology, the behaviors. It's really
exactly.
emotional mastery, right? Because again, it's our emotions that are really driving our behaviors, right? So that those two combined and integrated are going to get people to actually get
Yeah,
the data. And a lot of times that by itself is insight, but also not always. So get the data, but then also, all right, here's what we got to do. And then get people to actually take action and hold them accountable to do that. So I'm excited about the package we have together for people that want to optimize their genotype, phenotype, and actually implement it and take action on it and actually get better results in their life.
absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I think that I can't think of a different addition to what we're doing than you that would amplify the signal as much as you have so far in what you're doing as a whole as a complement to our programs.
Yep.
It was our selfishly speaking, it was our missing link. So of course, like I'm very excited to continue to do what we're doing, but because that was the element we were lacking a little bit, and that's not my background either. And
Yep.
and I mean I've learned a lot and I learned a lot from you too, but I was just Mr. Esoteric for so long. I'm like, no, it's just simple. Just do this thing, and or here's what CRP is. Or here's why this is important for inflammation, and here's the signaling paradigm that we're targeting here. No one cares. So like simplification and like again, I'm overusing the word a little bit, but the democratization, the simplification, and making these things accessible and understandable and trackable and easily digestible has been tremendous for us. And having you on board and doing these things together to really enhance the motivational elements to it, and you leverage and pull some of the psychological levers that you're so good at pulling. Again, it just amplifies the signal. It's great. It's incredibly complimentary. Yeah.
Absolutely, man. It's exciting. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I love the work you guys are doing there too at Bay State. Where can people find you if they want to reach out for info, connect, things like that? They could go to baystatelongevity.com. They can go to
That's a
your,
good starting point. Yeah, my email's there. My CV is on there as well, by the way. So I mean, I'm fairly well published in this space, and have a good, significant scientific background in all these things. And one thing I'm really proud of too that we put together on the website is the evidence behind these interventions or modalities. Like
yeah,
I put together a science page. It's a starting point. I mean, this is an evolving kind of document, but you can see through PubMed, through other studies that aren't even mine, for example. I have my studies are there, but there's also other studies. We put high impact, high level of evidence citations to support what we're doing. So the website's great. I have Instagram and TikTok now. I've been told this is important to help spread the gospel, if you will, about what we're doing. And so I have my handle's Aspen Longevity Doc or Sealy Hambright PhD, and I'm always posting there. I have a great advisor that helps me with this, and so we've been posting there any kind of things we're doing on site, but also just little tidbits, little facts or little ideas or little videos and about what we're up to. And so if anyone's curious what it like looks like or what the process is like, actually the social media is on a bad spot to see a tour of the facility and kind of how things work and some dialogue from me. You can always see it there.
nice. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. And if anybody's interested in the package we're doing together, they could reach out to either of us.
Either of us. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And we can talk more about that as well. And then what do you want to leave people off with as a departing message, Celie? What are your final words for now?
Start now. Yeah. Most, I think you would agree with, I'm sure you have a much more eloquent and elegant way of saying this. Um, but a lot of times I see people that they've been thinking about this for a year. This
Yeah.
like kind of taking control or grabbing more power back to their lives, if you will, and like you know hitting this pretty hard in terms of their whatever their wellness goal is, like attempting to do the thing in their wellness journey, longevity journey. And the question's always like, why didn't you come in 6 months ago? It's like, it's always something, right? And so, like, if anything, it's start now. And it can be as simple as just starting to do some reading, look at what we might have to offer, look at what you might have to offer, look what others have to offer. And it's never too early, I should say, I guess, to start. And I know you would agree with this, but I bet you can say that a lot better than I just did. But it's like, go, let's do it.
I think what you said was great. I would just say take action now. You said start now. That's great.
Yeah, yeah. And so yeah, that'd be my leaving note.
So true. That's awesome, man. Well,
Yeah.
it's great having you. I appreciate you sharing all your wisdom and insight, man. I know you put in a lot of work and time and studying to know
Yeah.
all this stuff. So thank you for sharing your wisdom
Oh
and
no, of course. Of course. Anytime. It was good to
awesome.
see you.